Have you ever tried to talk to your teenager and felt like you were speaking completely different languages? Maybe you found yourself wondering, where did my sweet, kind and caring kid go? I'm sure they weren't like this when they were 10. Maybe you've wondered why they seem to do increasingly stupid things that are quite obviously dangerous and going to have long-term negative impacts on their life. Or maybe worse, you find yourself looking at your teenager or the young person you're working with and you think, I don't even know who they are anymore. Well, if you've ever had those kinds of difficulties, stick around. By the end of this video, you're going to have a whole new perspective on the teenage brain, why children do the things they do, and maybe some ways that we could think about navigating it together. My name's Alex. I'm a forensic psychologist who specialises in people who have trauma in their histories and might struggle with antisocial and negative behaviour. So we already know that being a teenager is difficult. Parenting a teenager is difficult, and supporting teenagers in professional roles is also not an easy job. 1 minute they're sat on the sofa, completely engaging, playing PlayStation, watching YouTube, or listening to you talk. The next minute we're in some raving argument about what seemed like the smallest request or direction. Sometimes it can leave us, young people included, walking on eggshells, and everyone feeling like they're just waiting for the next battle or the next skirmish. By the end of the video, you'll be able to understand a bit more about why a teenager's brain is so unique. It's different to a child's brain, and it's also different to an adult's brain. You're going to understand a bit more about why teenagers are drawn to high risk and dangerous behaviours, and we're going to think about ways to support teenagers to manage these difficulties and challenges and get them ready for the difficulties they may face. Because the Porsche 911 Carrera shares certain features with the teenage brain. It looks good, doesn't it? Sleek, shiny, aerodynamic, high power and performance. This car symbolises the advantages and challenges of the teenage brain. It's full of potential with a lot of engine that has the capacity for complex function. However, it's also something that can be hard to control, difficult to manoeuvre in poor road conditions, not good over speed bumps, and something that needs to be driven with care. From the outside, everything looks just like a normal car. But the key components that should be handling all the heavy lifting, they're not there. It's not fully developed yet. But in teenagers, like the Porsche, the engine's located in the back, the older parts of the brain. So in adults, these days it's people who are age 24 plus, are mostly run by a strong prefrontal cortex. It powers the brain's higher order thinking, planning, decision making. It's fully developed, it's powerful, reliable, and controls most of the critical tasks when it comes to organising, managing impulses. In teenagers, however, this is still under construction, which helps to explain why their decision making sometimes feels impulsive or lacks any form of rational or critical thinking. Teenagers are driven by more primal urges. Don't blame them, it's their brains. The limbic system is key in adolescence. It's part of the brain that helps control emotions, memories, and how we respond to stress. It's a bit like the brain's emotional center, playing a big role in how we feel, react, and connect to other people. Key parts include the amygdala, that helps us process emotions like fear and anger. The hippocampus, that's important in forming and storing memories. The hypothalamus, that controls basic needs like hunger, sleep, and stress responses. The limbic system works together to help us navigate our emotions and adapt to the stresses of the world around us. What's next? Higher order thinking, as we spoke about. That prefrontal cortex, otherwise known as the CEO of the brain. It's responsible for impulse control, decision making, planning, thinking about how our actions are going to affect us, affect other people, and maybe assessing and managing risks in the environment. Think of it this way. When it comes to rewards, emotions, and motivation, teenagers have their feet firmly pressed on the accelerator, but the brakes are way too small for the power of the engine. Their limbic system's in complete control. It's incredibly sensitive to reward. And this part of the brain is like a high-octane engine, always searching for the next thrill, the next experience, the next big thing. It's reactive to social experiences. This is why things like peer pressure can seem so powerful to teenagers. They feel a heightened need to fit in, be accepted, and get that instant gratification from their friends and their environment. That's why those Gucci trainers matter so much. It's not about the trainers, it's about what the trainers represent. Their brains seek out activities that are low cost, high reward. Things like alcohol, drugs, dangerous driving. These things have massive payoffs in our hormonal outputs. Much more than a game of Monopoly, spending Saturdays watching gladiators with your parents, or engaging in a nice conversation after Sunday lunch. And it's not just about the reward, it's also about the emotions. The limbic system cranks up the emotional intensity, which is why teenagers often experience such severe mood swings. One minute they're on top of the world, the next minute they're down in the dumps. Everything feels like a massive deal because the brain's amplifying the emotions, and the part of the brain that turns off those impulses isn't fully developed yet. Remember, your cortical centers, reasoning, rational thinking, aren't there to dampen down the strong feelings associated with intense hormones. Do you remember any massive limbic type activities from your adolescence? I remember punching a massive dent in my family fridge because my dad promised to take me out on a driving lesson after work, but he got home and said he was too tired. I walked past that dent for years and felt the absolute shame of that moment of uncontrollable rage. Fridge never looked the same. I have no idea why I took it out on the fridge. Have you got any similar limbic horror stories you're safe to share? If so, put them in the comments and we can catalogue that we were all once teenagers who did stupid stuff. Okay, I think you're getting me now. So what we're saying is teenagers don't have a fully developed reasoning centre. They're driven by older parts of the brain that are more sensitive to social, emotional pressures and threats, and they don't have that ability to override those strong emotions in the same way that an adult does. They are actually ran by their emotions. But what other factors are at play for a teenager that a child or an adult isn't experiencing? You guessed it, hormones. Let's go back to that Porsche. So what keeps the Porsche engine driving optimally? This very expensive and premium oil, and of course, the high performance fuel. Boom, boom. That's kind of like how the huge boost in hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone do. This fuel doesn't just get the car moving, it makes it feel ready to race. Testosterone and estrogen start pouring into the brain around puberty for the first time, revving up that limbic system, the emotional, reward-seeking engine of the brain. Everything starts to feel more intense. I need it now! I was a terrible teenager. Teenagers are therefore more driven to take risks, seek excitement, and form intense emotional connections because their hormones are juicing up that reward system. This surge in fuel, hormones, creates heightened drive for social interaction, thrills, and new experiences. Just like that high-performance Porsche needs a skilled driver to control it, teenagers need guidance, support to handle the raw power of those hormones and that brain in overdrive. And that's where the prefrontal cortex, the brakes, and control center comes in. But since it's not fully developed, the teenage brain often doesn't have the ability to handle all that fuel and power efficiently. This is why they're more prone to risky behaviour, high-speed reactions, emotional outbursts, and sometimes crashing out and making terrible decisions. Those hormones, acting as fuel for emotional highs and social experiences, make the adolescent brain more susceptible to going from 0 to 100 in an instant. Where's my driving lesson? And whilst it's thrilling in the moment, the challenge is managing all that speed and power with the full control of the mature brain. So we've identified that teenagers don't have fully developed cortexes yet. The input of strong sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen for the first time can cause a significant shift. Teenagers process things through a more primal part of the brain. But that doesn't explain why at 10, they could think about other people's feelings, control their reactions, and engage in kind conversation. Why in the world did they lose those skills at 15? In order to understand that, there's one more crucial piece of information you need. We covered this in earlier videos. It's key for understanding adolescent brain development, the idea of pruning. Imagine we're taking a standard Porsche 911 like this one, and we're going to turn it into the GT3 ultimate track car. The transformation's about removing the parts that aren't necessary for track performance, weight reduction, improving aerodynamics, and making the car more efficient at high speeds. In the brain, we're talking about synaptic pruning and myelination. First up, synaptic pruning, the brain's version of slimming down. Just like the Porsche is stripped of unnecessary parts and weight for optimal performance, The brain removes connections that aren't regularly used, making the brain lighter and faster in its communication. It's about cutting away the excess to help the brain perform more efficiently. In this pruning phase, the brain isn't just losing weight, it's becoming a more efficient machine. So let's go back to that key question we asked a moment ago. Where did that sweet, kind, considerate 10-year-old go? The answer is, they're still there. It's just the brain, body, and hormones are undergoing significant changes during adolescence. That ability to think about how they feel and think about how their actions affect others just isn't developed. And it won't be until they're in their mid-20s. In those younger children, the 10-year-olds, their brains are simpler, less influenced by the dramatic changes brought on by hormones. Adolescence is a time of growth and adjustment which is temporary and makes emotional control more challenging. Make sure you check the description if you want some interesting stuff to read. Plenty there. So we've already covered a lot of ground today. The unique challenges and changes brought on by puberty and changes in the teenage brain. So let's bring it back to the social realm and think about what all this means for behaviour and connection to other people. So we know that the brain, the hormonal systems, and the social complexity of a teenager's life is shifting them towards developing a social brain, fitting in with other people, finding a sense of self, a sense of acceptance, and a sense of safety. As part of this process, areas of the brain involved in social thinking, facial recognition, and emotional regulation undergo significant changes because you're moving away from the safety of parents towards connection and belonging with peers. If these brain hormone interactions help us to form a social brain, it helps adolescents be highly motivated to gain belonging and acceptance from peers. Channel that David Attenborough stuff that we used to see from Planet Earth. Think about those baboons, gorillas and orangutans, and even lion prides. When a young teenage male reaches adolescence, sexual maturity, it's essential that they leave the family group in order to avoid issues of intrasexual competition and interbreeding with family members.
The adolescent male is still a potential rival. He must be careful. Olobor won't have to resort to bites that could hurt the wounded adolescent even more. The stepson's time with the pride here at the Rongai River has run out. He has to leave.
It's therefore crucial for adolescents, especially mammalian ones, to build connections and allegiances with other young people to protect them from the risks that dispersal can bring, like vulnerability to predators, starvation, hostility from other groups or individuals. Teenagers need to be ready to leave the home and they need to be ready to survive. They're pushed towards each other and away from parents.
In this next riveting piece of footage, we're going to see a situation in which two adolescent lions have wandered into the area of another pride and are soon to be challenged by the dominant male. This situation shows exactly why adolescents must group together in order to survive and thrive predation and risk from other predators. Alone, one adolescent would be heavily outmatched by a grown male lion, but together, in coalition, they may increase the odds of survival. One of the adolescents is heavily wounded with a puncture wound on his neck. This footage evidences perfectly the importance of association and alliance with other adolescents for the matter of survival.
You know what they say, there's safety in numbers. So now we've covered a bit about the neurology, the biology, and the social elements that drive teenage behaviour. So what in the world are we supposed to do about it? First off, what we've done so far is important. You'll have some understanding of the adolescent brain and how it develops. So watching this has at least started to get you thinking about why behaviours are happening and why teenagers find simple things quite difficult. It's brain level, it's hormonal level, and it's social level. This can form the foundation of ongoing exploration to better understand the challenges of teenagers today in 2025. In the era of UK urban culture, social media, and other complexities in life that we just didn't have to manage. We need to acknowledge and manage emotional intensity. We know that adolescence is a time where emotions can feel bigger, louder, and harder to manage than at any other time in your life. This is because the emotional part of your brain is running the show. And during the teenage and adolescent years, teens experience intense emotional highs and lows. And this is brain-level unconscious behaviour. Parents can help this by being patient and understanding during these emotional roller coasters, teaching healthy coping strategies like mindfulness, physical activity, creative outlets, engagement in sports and social groups can provide teens with tools to manage emotions in a constructive way. We want to support healthy social interactions and peer relationships. We want to help teenagers figure out who they are, and a big part of this involves their social lives. Peers and social media play a huge role, and that's why it's important to engage in honest conversation about these influences. Encourage teenagers to build friendships that support their values and well-being. Be proactive discussing the challenges of peer pressure, social media, and help them to recognize when they're being pushed towards unhealthy behavior. Promote healthy lifestyles, habits, and well-being. We want to build a foundation for a healthy brain and a healthy body, and that starts with our lifestyle habits. This is regular sleep, exercise, a balanced diet. Sometimes these elements help with emotional regulation and brain development. We want to encourage teenagers to follow a consistent sleep schedule, eat healthy and nutritious food, and stay active. On top of all that, you've got to make sure you celebrate their achievements, big ones and small ones. Recognize the growth that's happening and build their self-esteem and self-confidence. This kind of support can boost their resilience and help them face the challenges ahead with confidence. So we've established today that trauma plays a massive role in shaping the brain. But what if I told you that trauma isn't something from the past, especially for teenagers who are survivors of childhood trauma? So what further insights can brain science and psychology offer us to help manage this? YouTube usually suggests a nice video to watch after, so I'm sure it's going to recommend something decent for you. How about that one? What is it? Let me know in the comments.